Welcome back. Jordana Green here. It is 9:37. Thank you for spending some time with me. It's been a tough week on the global scale. 36 people were killed and 140 wounded when 3 suicide bombers struck the city's main airport in Istanbul, Turkey. It happened late Tuesday. Officials blamed Islamic State militants for the attack, but the group has not claimed full responsibility. Now, Turkey, a little background here, has been hit by more than a dozen attacks over the last year. It's confronting threats from both ISIS and Kurdish militants in the southeast. Dr. Alex Del Carmen heads up the School of Criminology, Criminal Justice, and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University in Texas. He's taught counterterrorism tactics course for the last 15 years. He's joining us tonight from Harvard, where he is teaching this week to talk about this kind of threat in Turkey and give us a little background there. Dr. Del Carmen, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
I think that most of us don't necessarily know the full situation that's going on in Turkey. Now, Turkey shares a border with Syria, so it doesn't surprise me that many attacks have happened over the last year from ISIS. But can you give us a little bit of background about the Turkish government and what their threat of terrorism is there?
Well, you know, Turkey is actually one of our strategic partners in the Middle East, and really in the past 2 to 3 years, they have become incredibly active in the fight against ISIS, to the extent that I believe that without their help, we wouldn't have been as effective as we have been in the past few months. So clearly, by virtue of their location, their geographic location, their form of government, as well as their affiliation with the United States, they actually pose as a major target for ISIS.
So the U.S. looks at them as an ally. What is their form of government?
So their form of government is simply, I guess we could call it a quasi-democratic way of government, whereby they actually have close to what we would depict in the Western society to be a democracy. They're definitely a capitalistic state. They're very affluent, and at the same time they enjoy the benefits of some degree of freedom. Perhaps in the Middle East standards would be one of the freest of all states. And therefore, by virtue of their way of life, by virtue of their affiliation with the U.S., their admiration for capitalism, their investment, their strategic location, all of those factors sum up to the extent that they do, and they allow for ISIS to view them as an enemy.
Is there free reign on their borders? Can people from Syria and Turkey travel freely through the borders, or do they have the equivalent of a metaphorical wall and tightened security because Syria is such a mess?
The security is, the Turkish government claims that the security is rather tight, while at the same time, obviously, it's impossible to be able to negate the entrance, whether legally or illegally, in such a vast border, with various entities that have been known in the past 10 years to promote and inculcate terrorism. It's almost impossible to deny entrance to individuals that want to come in and cause harm on Turkey. So the answer to your question is yes, for the most part they have it controlled. Are they foolproof? Absolutely not.
Now, ISIS hasn't, as far as I know, by the way, the latest developments say 41 people are dead, dozens more wounded, of course, after that attack. ISIS, as far as I know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the very latest is that they haven't formally claimed responsibility for this attack. Is that the case?
That is correct. Even though, all of us agree, including the CIA director, that, in fact, the signature, the modus operandi, the way they went about this attack, is pretty much has the signature of ISIS.
Now, when we talk about them attacking, ISIS attacking Turkey, obviously you said the reasons are because they're a capitalistic society. They're basically as free, freer than, some kind of Islamic state, some kind of, certainly than a caliphate would be. So is ISIS on a full throttle attack against capitalism, which makes this less of a religious war and more of an ideological one?
Well, they actually attacked during the month of Ramadan, so that would make it an absolutely not a religious war at all. In addition to that, I would argue that what they're doing is strategically attacking the United States' interest overseas and any of its allies. And being that Turkey is one of our major allies in the Middle East, and then obviously they would serve as a target. Keep in mind also that ISIS has been greatly damaged in the past few months. The president has said it multiple times. Department of Defense has announced it several times in their briefings that ISIS is very virtually on the run right now. But having said that, that's not to say that they're largely diminished in power, strength, and ability to cause harm. And so we now have not only the ISIS elements overseas, but we also have those individuals that are sympathizers of ISIS that we have no idea who they are.
And we know just last weekend Fallujah was taken back, at least that's what we're hearing, by rebel forces that are backed by U.S. aid. So ISIS has reportedly been driven out of Fallujah. Do you have an update on that, and is that the case?
Well, the reports simply indicate that they have in fact been diminished substantially, and whether or not they're completely out of Fallujah remains to be seen. But what we do know is that they're on the run, which is certainly encouraging news. But as you will know, anytime you have such a vast group of people with such ideologies that are extreme, just the fact that they don't claim a particular land to be their own does not necessarily mean that they're not going to cause any harm to the United States or its interest. And in fact, I would argue the opposite, that the more that they're desperate, the more desperate that they are, the more they're going to try to inflict pain on the United States.
Now, we were talking today about attacks on sites like airports. And in the afternoon show that I joined in on, people were suggesting that we have security at even higher security than it already is at places like airports. And then, of course, I suggested that, well, if it's not the airport, it's going to be the mall, or it's going to be the grocery store, or it's going to be a stadium. Why are airports such a hot ticket for terrorist attacks? And do you suspect it would go to places like stadiums or malls if security gets too tight at airports?
Absolutely. And so airports are very symbolic for terrorists. And we saw that during the 9/11 attacks because they wanted to paralyze the United States. And remember and keep in mind that terrorists, more so than the infrastructure damage and even the loss of life, what they want to do is penetrate the American psychic, the psychic of the public, to simply let them know that they're not safe anywhere. And so their tactic is to inflict pain, to inflict psychological damage on all of us, to the extent that we won't go shopping, that we will not go to a movie theater on a Saturday night, that we will not fly anywhere because of the fear that we're going to be next. Now, statistically speaking, it's very difficult to become a victim of a terrorist act because they're so sporadic and all over the place. Having said that, most of us that watch this on live TV and see it happening in front of us believe that, in fact, it could happen to us. And that is their mission. Their mission is to inflict that level of pain in our minds so that we think we're next.
Now, President Obama said, quote, they're going to be defeated in Syria. He's speaking about ISIS, by the way, and they're going to be defeated in Iraq. What is it going to take? And by the way, if you're just tuning in, I'm speaking with Dr. Alex Del Carmen, who is heads up the School of Criminology at Charlotte State University, and he's teaching at Harvard this week counterterrorism tactics. What is it going to take to make the president's words that say they're going to be defeated in Syria, they're going to be defeated in Iraq? What will it take to make that happen?
So I think it's going to require an amazing amount of work on behalf of the administration in Washington. It's also going to require coordination with other countries throughout the world to be able to do that. This is not only a military takeover, but it's also going to require a financial disruption into their practices. It's also going to require for social media to be somewhat controlled and looked into, because we know that ISIS is incredibly powerful and has been very effective in recruiting individuals throughout the world to follow their ideology. So when the president uses the word defeat, I hope that it means that it's going to be defeat beyond the military perspective, that it's also going to include defeat from a standpoint of money as well as tactics that they're using for social media.
You mean by money? You mean going in and, do you mean boots on the ground, staying in and installing democracy and making it take root?
It's going to be incredibly hard. In fact, the United States,
yes, it is.
In its foreign policy affairs, we're really good at invading a country, but we really are not good at leaving a country, and particularly being able to replicate democracy anywhere else, because some people just don't have a conceptualization of what democracy is as we know it in the U.S. Having said all that, I think what it will require is a major effort on our end, and boots on the ground should not be negated. As much as we fear the loss of life of our soldiers, at the end of the day, we are going to have to negate ISIS the ability to infiltrate the United States and attack us. The FBI director recently said that he has information that all 50 states have individuals that either sympathize with ISIS or are ISIS affiliates. That is concerning, and that is disturbing, considering the fact that this is a time bomb waiting to happen in the United States.
Do you think it will take a massive invasion, and do you think it'll take serious force, or do you think they can be weeded out via social media and maybe removing heads of ISIS at a time?
So the answer to that question is all of the above. I mean, really, there's no country to invade other than perhaps, regaining back some of the ground that we've lost in Iraq and Syria. But at the same time, ISIS is all over the world, and this is an ideology. It doesn't have it does have a flag, but it doesn't have a territory to claim. They have bank accounts in different parts throughout the world. These folks have been effective at being able to hide from our authorities and from the international military forces that are after them.
It's a messy problem to have. Dr. Alex Del Carmen from Tarleton State University, currently teaching in Harvard. Thank you so much for your expertise on the show and for making it plain for us.
Thank you much.
You got it. He makes an excellent point. There's nowhere to invade. There's nowhere to drop a bomb. What are we going to do? They're in different pockets. I don't want to say they're everywhere because they're probably smaller than we think, but they have presences in many places. And it isn't as easy as going in and securing one country or one city or one region and stopping it. It's not that simple. It makes it a little more frightening that way. I'm Jordana Green. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a moment.